Hey youth group, Troy here with another Wednesday night devotion. Tonight I want to talk to you about the disciples and how old they were when they were discipling. I want to start with scripture from Matthew chapter 17 verses 24 through 27. And it says, "After Jesus and his disciples arrived in Capernaum, the collectors of the 2 drachma temple tax came to Peter and asked, 'Doesn't your teacher pay the temple tax?' 'Yes, he does,' he replied. When Peter came into the house, Jesus was the first to speak. 'What do you think, Simon?' he asked. 'From whom do the kings of the earth collect duty and taxes? From their own children or from others?' 'From others,' Peter answered. 'Then the children are exempt,' Jesus said to him. 'But so that we may not cause offense, go to the lake and throw out your line. Take the first fish you catch, open its mouth, and you will find a 4-drachma coin. Take it and give it to them for my tax and yours.'" That's an extremely interesting passage. First of all, there's a miracle involved. He goes out, he fishes. The first fish he catches, he opens it up. Sure enough, there's a 4-drachma coin in it. And then he takes it and pays the tax. Now, that's worthy of talking about, but the point that I want to bring out about this passage is not the miracle, but what it means. Why did just Jesus and Peter have to pay the 2-drachma temple tax? All the other disciples were there and with him, but only Jesus and Peter had to pay. Why is that? Well, if we go back to Exodus chapter 30, verses 14 through 15, here's what we find out. "All who cross over those 20 years old or more are to give an offering to the Lord." So basically what that is saying is that anyone over the age of 20 is required to pay the tax. So that means Jesus and Peter were over the age of 20, but none of the other disciples were over 20. Now, we also know or have a hint at the disciples' age because of, I think it's called the Toy or something like that. It's basically rabbinical commentary that's added to Scripture. So we know from tradition that there is a system of education in biblical times where at age 5 all kids would begin studying Scripture. And then I think the cutoff is 7 or 10, I can't remember. They moved to Mishnah, and then beyond that, prophets and things they study. And then at age 15, if they have done well in their studies from the other 3 or the other 2 levels, then they are chosen by a rabbi to become a disciple. It was a distinguished thing. It meant a lot. You had to be really smart to progress to that. So we know that these disciples had already returned to their father's trade, right? Because Jesus caught them while they were fishing. They were already back at whatever their fathers did. So when Jesus came and called them to be disciples, they had to be after age 15. So all the disciples, with the exception of Peter, were between 15 and 20. So they were either 15, 16, 17, 18, or 19, because once you turn 20, you pay the temple tax. So what I'm saying is that all these disciples who did all these crazy things, followed Jesus around in his ministry for 3.5 years, and we know Jesus was 30 when he started his ministry, also through tradition, because that's when rabbis were permitted to start teaching. So I'm sure Jesus was teaching before that, but he wasn't really recognized as rabbi until that time. So when Jesus, the rabbi, chooses his disciples and goes around, he has chosen youth. He has chosen students for that task. Now, fast forward to today, most teenagers, most youth, they don't think of themselves as legit disciples. We kind of, at least I did when I was your age, when I was a teenager, I thought, that was up to the preachers and teachers and things like that. Folks that were much older, it was their job to spread the gospel and tell people about Jesus and know about this book and all that's in it. But no, in Jesus' day, it was teenagers who really knew the Word and followed a rabbi around and taught what he taught. Remember, there was a part in Scripture where Jesus sent the disciples out without him. He said, you go to these different cities and you preach the gospel. And if they're not receptive to it, then you wipe this dust from your sandals and move on to the next place. So imagine at somewhere between age 15 and 19, you were going from city to city in strange places, talking to older people, adults, about Jesus, about this gospel. The last passage I want to read to you is from Timothy. Paul is writing to Timothy, which is sort of his disciple. Paul has been taking him around on his different missionary journeys, and then Timothy is out on his own while Paul is in prison, I believe. And so Paul gives him this bit of encouragement. And it is 1 Timothy 4:12. It says, "Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity." So Paul is essentially telling Timothy, a teenager, most likely, he could have been over the age 20, that just because you're young, don't let that stop you. Don't be intimidated by older people. You know enough, because Paul was training Timothy and Jesus were training the disciples so that they knew what they needed to know to go out and tell people the good news. Now, the church and our youth group, that's why we exist. Part of the reason. Our purpose, our agenda, and we have an agenda, not just to have good times and throw parties and go on beach trips or things like that. Our mission is to teach our students, to teach our young teens what it means to know Jesus, to love Jesus, and to follow Jesus, and to teach Jesus to the world. I hope this devotion is an encouragement to you that you are old enough to start loving and following and teaching people about Jesus in your way. We are all gifted and talented with different things. And the person that you can reach may be a person I never could. So I hope these words of Scripture are an encouragement to you. Hey, I love you, youth group. Make sure you're around on on Sunday for Sarah's devotion and for all the games and stuff that we do on Wednesdays and all the fun questions that Sarah is putting out at noon every day. Love you guys. Bye.